January 5, 1942. The streets of Tokyo are deafening. In less than a month, the Japanese imperial forces have swept the western Pacific, Hong Kong, Malaya, Manila. The Octopus, as one man put it, was spread flat. That man was Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto. Aboard his flagship, the mighty Yamato, Yamamoto received the victory reports, yet felt no triumph. He saw only a dangerous mirage. Yamamoto was a pragmatist. He knew the war Japan had started could not be won in the long run. He'd lived in Washington. He understood America's industrial heart, a heart that, once enraged, could never be out-produced. His strategy was never conquest. It was a bluff. An all-or-nothing gamble to seize a massive perimeter and then, crucially, force a negotiated peace. He told his friend, the right-wing leader Ryuichi Sasakawa, "We must get a peace agreement by then." Yamamoto had a critical moment in mind, the fall of Singapore. He believed this disaster would rattle the British in India and open the door to talks. Singapore fell on February 15th, ahead of schedule. The political clock was ticking faster than Yamamoto expected. But what next? The Imperial General Staff was consumed by disagreement over the second stage. They had three ideas. The army vetoed an attack on the Soviet Union. They also vetoed Yamamoto's brilliant but risky plan to invade Ceylon, destroy the British fleet, and link up with the Germans in the Middle East for oil. Too much risk, too far afield. The Naval General Staff proposed the logical next step: Australia. Starve the Americans of their last major base in the South Pacific. But Yamamoto dismissed it. It was slow. It was not the knockout blow he needed. What Yamamoto needed was a spectacle. Because at Pearl Harbor, the American aircraft carriers, the true heart of the U.S. Navy, had been untouched. They were the key to America's unstoppable vengeance, and they had to be destroyed. In March, Yamamoto presented his own plan, the Me Plan: lure the remaining American carrier fleet into a decisive battle near Midway Atoll, destroy them, force the peace. The stakes couldn't be higher, but a little incident in April ensured Yamamoto would get his way. On April 18th, Lieutenant Colonel Jimmy Doolittle's B-25 bombers, launched from a carrier, hit Tokyo. Militarily, the damage was negligible. Psychologically, it was a thunderbolt. Japan was sacred. Japan was untouchable. The raid shattered the illusion. It confirmed Yamamoto's worst fear. The soft, incompetent Americans were only beginning to fight. The Midway Plan, which would extend Japan's perimeter so far that Tokyo could never be bombed again, became an immediate vital necessity. While the Midway plans were finalized, the Naval General Staff independently kept advancing southward. Their goal: New Guinea and the eventual isolation of Australia. They took Rabaul in January, turning it into their massive forward air and naval base. In May, the Japanese sent an invasion force toward Port Moresby, but it was met by a joint Australian-American force in the Battle of the Coral Sea. The Japanese were turned back, the first ever naval battle fought entirely by aircraft, with the surface ships never seeing each other. But the Japanese did succeed in seizing the small island of Tulagi, north of Guadalcanal, to establish a seaplane base. Then came June. Yamamoto's great gamble. The Battle of Midway. It was supposed to be the spectacular achievement to force peace. Instead, it was a stunning disaster. Japan lost 4 big fleet carriers in a few hours. The full extent of the defeat was suppressed. The Imperial Army in the field was told it was a victory. But Yamamoto's window, his 18 months, had just been obliterated. The strategic initiative had passed to the Americans. The Japanese were now vulnerable. The question for the Allies was no longer if they should counterattack, but where and who would lead it. In Washington, the counteroffensive devolved into a fierce power struggle. On one side, General Douglas MacArthur demanding a preemptive strike on Rabaul. commanded by the Army with 3 carriers and divisions. On the other, Admiral Ernest J. King, a notoriously aggressive and unyielding man. King opposed MacArthur commanding Navy assets. He devised his own plan, a Navy-led drive up from the New Hebrides, focusing on the Santa Cruz Islands and Tulagi. King's Plan 1. It was more economical and utilized the defense line the Navy had already built. The operation was split. Phase 1, the initial landings, went to the Navy. Phase 2, the later mop-up, was grudgingly tossed to MacArthur. The target was Tulagi and adjacent positions. One of those adjacent positions was a small, unimportant island called Guadalcanal, but Guadalcanal was about to become the single most important piece of dirt in the Pacific. In late June, Allied intelligence confirmed what the Australian coast watchers had been reporting. The Japanese were clearing a central plain Lunga Point and building a massive airfield. Intercepted messages confirmed the arrival of the 11th and 13th Pioneer Forces construction units on July 4th. Rear Admiral Richmond Kelly Turner, King's chief planner, was visiting Pearl Harbor. When he saw the intelligence, he knew instantly the Americans had to strike first. Before that airfield became operational, Turner was given the amphibious command and a ludicrous deadline: train an entire invasion force in 1 month. The logistics were a nightmare. Supplies were loaded hodgepodge at Oakland, no proper combat loading. Admiral Gormley, the overall commander, was plunged into gloom. On July 28th, the tactical commanders finally met aboard the carrier Saratoga. The mood was poisonous. General Vandegrift, commander of the Marines, and Admiral Turner listened as the carrier commander, Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher, announced his policy. "I will protect the landings for only 48 hours. The carriers cannot be risked. The whole operation is cockeyed, hasty, and doomed." Turner, VO. "The decision to risk all has been made. It is our job to carry out the orders. The rehearsal near Fiji was a complete bust. Only a third of the troops got ashore. But there was no time for a do-over. On July 31st, 17,000 Marines were streaming toward the Solomons. The landing was on. And thanks to terrible Japanese intelligence, the entire armada enjoyed the one advantage every commander dreams of: complete surprise. 5:30 a.m., August 7, 1942. As the sun rose over the Solomons, the American fleet opened fire. At 6:12 a.m., the Japanese seaplane base on Tulagi sent one frantic, final message: enemy heavy bombardment in progress. The carriers Wasp, Saratoga, Enterprise launched strikes that achieved total air superiority. At Gavutu, they wiped out every single Japanese aircraft on the water. Not one plane survived the initial attack. At 9 a.m., the first Marines landed on the north shore of Guadalcanal, near Lunga Point. The going was ridiculously easy. They found a breakfast table set with food, rice bowls scattered, beds untouched. The Japanese pioneer construction troops had fled into the hills, wholly unprepared for a landing. The Marines quickly seized the objective, the half-completed airfield. But 2 miles across the channel, on the tiny, rugged island of Tulagi, the war was already turning into a nightmare. Here, Lieutenant Colonel Merritt A. Edson's 1st Marine Raider Battalion landed. These were elite troops, trained for months in extreme conditions. They were about to face the hardened veterans of the Yokohama Air Base Detachment 250 determined, dedicated Japanese fighters. The raiders advanced along a ridge, chopping through jungle, until they ran into the central Japanese defenses, interlocking fields of fire from machine guns set in rock embrasures. This was no walkover. This was the first contact between the Allies' best and the Japanese veterans. The only way to advance was by crawling up cliffs and dropping dynamite charges and grenades into the dugouts. Even then, the Japanese fought to the last man. The Marines learned another hard lesson fast. Japanese snipers were everywhere, often letting the forward element pass before shooting from behind, exchanging their own life for a few Marine casualties. As darkness fell, Edson pulled his men back from a natural fortress, a ravine the Japanese had dug into. It was too dangerous to probe unknown defenses in the dark. That night, the Marines experienced their final, terrifying introduction. The Japanese, knowing they were trapped and outnumbered, launched their infamous banzai charges, screaming, suicidal frontal attacks. The Battle of Tulagi was a meat grinder. Yamamoto's strategic gamble, designed to force a political peace within 18 months, had failed at Midway. Now, his operational failure to protect a small airbase led to the first American offensive. On August 7, 1942, the fight for a spot on the map called Guadalcanal began, a fight that would ultimately decide the fate of the war in the Pacific. The Americans had landed, but they were about to be abandoned by their own carrier commander. Click here to see how Admiral Fletcher's 48-hour ultimatum led to the catastrophic naval battle of Savo Island next week.